Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Tarkson, Gallery Director at the Greenville Center for Creative Arts. In this interview, I talk with Beyond the Edge exhibiting artist Anna Vizcarra Rankin to explore the stories behind her ever-evolving art practice. Anna reimagines the world as we know it into poetic explorations of cartography, with deep senses of personal and cultural history. Anna invites us to look beyond the intersection of mapmaking, the earth, and the cosmos. Beyond the Edge will be on display in our main gallery through May 28th. Admission is free, so come see Anna's work in a whole new light before it leaves at the end of the month. Hey Anna, how are you? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in map making?
Hi, Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm AV Rankin. I make art about maps. And I think what first drew me to maps was the idea that they can be a way to illustrate just about anything or visualize just about anything. So I'm really engaged with this idea of anything can be a map, if that makes sense. It started out as like a family tree, and I superimposed that on a world map. And then I started looking at a lot of the stars at night and started making some star maps that worked with where we are at a specific space and time. And I just couldn't stop. So it became this um, really great way to engage with making artwork in a way that made sense to me.
How has your artistic practice evolved over the years? And what pivotal moments have significantly influenced your work?
So I've been doing this for about 30 years now, which is wild to think about. I was always interested in visualizing reality. So I had this line of inquiry in my work where I was looking at comparative mythology and how the way that myths made up our culture and how they were similar and different from each other. And then when I was in graduate school at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia, and I embarked on this kind of self-portrait piece, I came across the world map well, the South American map, América Invertida, by Joaquin Torres Garcia, who's a Uruguayan artist, because I was looking at my own history and histories of migration. Uruguay is entirely populated by immigrants. There's no longer a native population there. And uh, and I came across this idea of using maps with the South at the top. And that kind of got me started looking at mythology in a different way. So instead of having figures in my work, I started thinking of myself and all the other viewers as the figures that were in the work, that were part of this universe that I'm creating in a painting. And that was a huge shift in not only what was being represented in the paintings, which I really moved away from painting people and animals and scenes that are figurative and representational, to making this work that reads more as an abstract painting, but is in fact highly representational of, of either expressionism to some degree, but there's also this quasi-didactic component from this very unreliable narrator. So it kind of took things to a sort of meta level, and now I'm starting to look back as a mom and think back to some of the more representational work that I was doing when I was younger, and it's pulling me back. So you'll see in some of the pieces, there's, for example, in Balance of Power, my newest one, um, there are some deer hoofs and raptor claws and human feet and a cetacean tail there. So figures are starting to kind of make their way back into the work. You can see in Old Midsummer, there is Hercules dressed up with the donkey ears of Bottom in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night Dream. So those myths that are written in the stars that we used to think of as people, and they're starting to make their way back to all my maps and my bits of data visualization.
Now, having been raised in both South and North America, how has your personal history influenced your artistic exploration?
That's a great question. I think a lot about where we are and what it took to arrive there and where we all started, which is our planet. I think, spending the first half of my childhood in Uruguay, near a beach, in a very cosmopolitan place, and then moving to Central North America, to Oklahoma, was a really big cultural shift for me. And since then, I've gone back to the coast, and it has very much reinforced this idea that um, there are many places that are very alike, and yet each place is unique. So I integrate that into creating these map objects um, in a way that feels very personal.
Your art reimagines erased histories and offers alternate perspectives. Can you discuss the importance of this approach in your work?
What is history, right? I mean, it's recorded memories. It's how we create our present. Uh, the language that we use in history, the fact that it's history and not herstory. There's so much humanity in all of it, and and it's a map. It's a map in time. And because of so many of the things that interest me about maps are what is being told and from what point of view, once you start mapping out histories of places too, and of places and of cultures, you start to see these gaps that have been filled by newer things, and it creates this kind of um, palimpsest of the space-time continuum, if you will. And so I'm very interested in those little gaps, and I start to look at what's behind them, what has been filled. And many times those are cultures that have been um, erased in different ways. So I seek to kind of pull back information from those cultures that is relevant to us, such as um, what is contained in language and naming specifically.
This main gallery exhibition, Beyond the Edge, explores humanity's propensity to observe, discover, and control space. How does your work fit into the theme of pushing boundaries and exploring the unknown?
I love the word the unknown because it implies that it could be known. Then there is the unknowable, which is kind of beyond the edge of what science and study can uncover, and that's where art and spirituality come in. This exploration of the unknowable, of that which cannot be mapped, and that's the edge. You go beyond this edge of I've looked at all this data. This is what I've found. And here is my little bit of humanity, of spirit that I'm carrying, that I am um, superimposing over this often digitally and mechanically collected data. You interpret it, I interpret it with my body. And that creates that boundary of, well, up until this point, this was a tool um, of exploration, of examination, and then when it is transmogrified into a piece of artwork, it starts to open up these windows into these conversations that we were discussing earlier of, well, what's everything really all about? What lies beyond the surface of this reality that we're creating for ourselves with our language and with our maps and with our culture.
One of your pieces in this exhibition, titled Warm Acid Bath, addresses environmental issues. How are you integrating ecological themes into your work? And can we use this piece as an explanation example?
So Warm Acid Bath is this painting, and it is a snapshot of the sea surface temperatures that were being collected in 2015. So it now has just turned 10 years old. This was being collected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a branch of NASA. And it's showing all the white areas are unknown. We now have data from those areas around Antarctica. But it's showing how the sea surface temperatures have been changing over the last decade. You can see in the blue areas, it's mostly polar melt. In 2015, we had the Fukushima meltdown, so you can see that red plume going across the ocean and hitting the Galapagos Islands offshore from Ecuador. There was a severe die-off because of an ExxonMobil oil spill, which you can also see there as a warm patch. And then I don't know if I already said polar melt, but a lot of polar melt. And that is being reinforced. I've been making the collages that are the reference material for this for the last 10 years, and it's just becoming more and more extreme, and the data is getting harder and harder to get to because it's getting paywalled and protected so that we don't have that kind of transparency. But it's also this like wonderful, colorful reminder of our visible spectrum.
So, how are you making your work in specific? What are some of the processes that go into your paintings?
This is one of the ways that I paint is on the floor. And then the other way that I paint is just as you had it, and in the in warm acid bath, you can see that there are drips. I'm very intentional about my drips. There are several pieces being shown that show drip and splatter. So you do get that kind of historic chronology that's left in the details of the work of how this piece was rendered, whether it was flat or while up against a surface such as a wall. A lot of the time, I like to submerge these pieces in bodies of water. This helps them physically. It helps the fiber become softer and more malleable and more open to inks and paints. Some of these have been in indoor-outdoor exhibitions, such as the one at Cherry Street Pier, where I had 75,000 square feet of space to show work. So I got to show so much work. And we went through a couple of snowstorms and a few rainstorms while the work was out. And some of it was truly rendered greater by that abuse. And this is part of what maps are about, right? You take them with you. Back before we had GPS, you would take this paper map that would be all folded up and you'd take it on your trip. And if it was a good one, you'd leave marks, and then you'd bring it back and it would be all beat up, but you wouldn't get rid of it because that was that trip, that amazing trip that you took. And some of these pieces, you can see that they've been working pieces that have been exhibited before. Whereas some of them, like Balance of Power, is so fresh that it's not even completely, the metal leaf that's on it is barely cured and only has like the first layer of sealant on it. So I call these working pieces because they're very much alive to me. They're not stretched and mounted.
Your paintings in this show delve into both terrestrial and cosmic spaces. How do you navigate the interplay between these two areas of interest?
So the Earth is in space. We are that connection. We are the connection between Earth and space. And that is so much of the foundation of how and why I make my work. The way that I make it and the size that I make it. And the newest group that includes Balance of Power, which is that long painting with the two hemispheres that's being shown above the floor. I have connected and I was inspired by this reimagining of the hemispheric map of the North and South hemispheres and how this would be such an extraordinary way to teach geography to young people, to all people, because it is so much more accurate than most of the map projections that we use. You can fold that up and you have yourself a nice little flat globe, and it's actually fairly accurate in terms of the distortion. And these reimaginings of the connection between ourselves and space, we become aware of where we are in relationship to our planet, to all the terraforming we have already done, and to all that we could do if we treated nature gently and moved respectfully.
Anna, I want to thank you for joining me today to talk about your artwork in the exhibition Beyond the Edge.
Thanks for having me.
I hope everyone enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one.